I'm 45 and I'm broke and I'm all in on Bitcoin. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's clickbait. It's just to get you engaging. But the reality is it's not a headline. It's true. And the uncomfortable bit is I don't have a backup. So how did I find myself in this position and how am I going to get myself out? I never started a pension. I never started a 401k, as you call it in the US. And for the last 15 years, I've always worked for myself. Now, my thoughts were that my business would be my pension. If I put enough into the business, I could build a pot of money or something in there, some assets or something. But the reality is my business went belly up in 2025 after the pandemic. In that business, I had a bit of cash, I had a property, but once the business got liquidated and I got wound up, I had nothing left except the last $10,000. Now, I'm not doing this for sympathy because I know the risks I took. I knew what I was getting myself into, but I am saying it because it does change the maths. It changes the urgency of things and it creates a level of risk that, quite frankly, I don't want to take, but I have to. I know some of you who are watching this will be saying, you know, just do index funds, just go on the S&P 500, go into gold, things like that. And if that's available to you and you've been doing it for decades, then great. I think that's a great path to go down. But here's the part that nobody kind of realizes in my context is that I don't have a clean runway. I don't have 20, 30 years of savings in a pot. I was never responsible enough to do that sort of thing. And quite frankly, I thought my business would pay off one day, but ultimately, the pandemic changed all of that for good. I think that path, such as stocks and shares, all world ISAs and things like that are a great option for most people. I'm not anti-tradition, I'm just realistic about where my starting line is. For example, you can see here if I invested my $10,000 over 10-year projections across gold or S&P or NASDAQ or a blended portfolio, I'm only going to kind of double my money, and that's just not enough to retire, especially in the time frames I have. So why Bitcoin? You know, I needed something that matched my reality and my time frame and my time horizon. I needed an asset I could commit to in the short term, but I also needed something like a set of rules that I could follow. The thing about Bitcoin is it's volatile, and most people that's kind of scary for them. But for me and for what I'm trying to do, I need the volatility. I trade in and out of Bitcoin. I use a rotation strategy that needs volatility. So when the market is rallying and things are going up, I actively hold Bitcoin. But when the market looks a little bit exhausted, I step out the market, I rotate back to stables. That's why Bitcoin is a great asset for me and in my personal circumstances. There's a few reasons why Bitcoin as well and why I like it for a retirement asset. The reality is we do live in a world where the governments are consistently printing money, right? Your currencies, your euros, your dollars and your pounds, they're getting constantly debased, right? The US is in a debt crisis, whether people want to believe it or not. And the only way to get out of this debt crisis is either to default on the loan that the US have or to print their way out, to use inflation as a way out. And the US government always chooses inflation. Now, Raoul Pal, who is a very famous macroeconomist, he seemed to think that debasement is eroding your fiat currency at like 11% to 15% per year. If you add debasement and inflation, that's the total. So the reality is, if you could invest in stocks and shares and gold or anything like that, any other assets, you need to be making at least 10% if you're going to get your head above water. Bitcoin offers 40% CAGR, right? Compound annual growth rate. Yes, I know that we'll see diminishing returns over years, but if I use the volatility and compound my profits, I can absolutely smash those compound annual growth rate results. And I know some of you might be thinking, I'm living in dreamland, but over the last 3 years, that's exactly what I've been doing. I speculatively invested $1,500 in Bitcoin when I had a bit of cash. And over the last 3 years, I've been using a rotational strategy to work that money up. And over the last 3 years, I've turned $1,500 to $10,000. I have a Substack where I talk about exactly what I'm doing, every trade, every decision, full transparency. The irony is I didn't expect to have to rely on that $10,000 to fund my retirement. When I say I'm all in on Bitcoin, I'm not being reckless. I'm not being careless, contrary to what you might think. I don't mean I'm trying to get rich quick, because I don't think there's any such thing. What I mean is this is the one strategy that I'm taking very, very seriously. I feel like through discipline and a set of rules for the first time in my life, I can actually focus my energy on something that's working out for me. The thing about running a business is you can work really hard, you can work really smart, but ultimately there's so many variables that can affect the outcome of that business. I wasn't a reckless businessman, I was quite a good businessman. I always managed cash flow, but the reality is you can't account for something like a pandemic. It shows you that something, even though you're really good at and everything's working in your favor, an anomaly such as a global pandemic or a loss of a contract or something like that can really throw a cat amongst the pigeons and really ruin your plans. And there's very little you can do to mitigate against that. If you compound some of those variables, those negative variables, with the fact that here in the UK, the government are making it very difficult for business owners to make a meaningful amount of money, what with corporation tax hikes, income tax hikes, the employee rights and benefits bills, the UK companies now taking responsibility of their employees' retirement and pensions. It's becoming increasingly difficult to make money running a business. If I take that same discipline and same integrity with my investments through Bitcoin, I've demonstrated to myself over the last 3 years that actually I can make it work. I can avoid as many variables as possible by having a clear set of rules, some discipline, and a very strict timeline. The other thing to consider is I don't have a number of different wealth engines. You know, my business and my income is gone. I'm going to try and make money through my YouTube channel, my Substack. I do a bit of consulting on the side, but ultimately I need to take the pot of money I've got and compound those profits over time. I want my investment in my Bitcoin retirement portfolio to do all the heavy lifting for me. My time to dedicate to income, to put into that, is very limited now. I think I've got maybe a 10 or a 15-year time horizon. So I need to compound the profits. I need to use the volatility to get to where I need to be. This isn't about getting lucky. This is about not staying stuck. It is scary, you know. I sometimes question myself, what if I'm wrong? But I've been doing this for a few years now, and my rules seem to help. I've done a recent video on a traffic light system I use to understand if I'm going to be in and out of the market. But yeah, it can be scary. Am I making the right decision? Am I making the wrong decision? But sometimes what's even more scarier is there is no alternative. I don't have anything else to do. I thought for a long, long time I was being very sensible, and that really hasn't played out to me. You know, when I had my business and I knew it was going under, I plowed everything back into it. I had staff that needed paying, families that needed food on the table. These were things that were going through my mind at the time. Not my retirement, my pension, but actually keeping people working, keeping myself working, keeping an income for multiple families. And ultimately, it kicked me in the arse. By focusing my time and energy on a Bitcoin retirement portfolio, I'm completely accountable. I don't have to worry about paying staff or employees or overheads. I can make all the decisions. I'm completely responsible whether this turns out well or badly, and I don't have to worry about hurting anyone along the way. So this is me choosing discomfort now, just out of necessity, because I do want to have a shot at a decent retirement. I do want a shot at a better ending for me. If you're watching this and you still think an investment in Bitcoin is absolutely crazy, I do use a very specific set of rules. I don't blindly buy and hold, right? So you'll be watching this after the recent drawdown. Bitcoin is down, what, 40, 50, 60% from its all-time high in October 2025. The rules I used actually allowed me to exit back in November 2025 when we were at $117,000. Now we've come back down to like $62,000. The system and the rules I use help me avoid that drawdown. I'm not blindly buying and holding. I'm not hodling on for dear life. I have a system and a very clear set of rules. I buy with a plan. I buy with a set of rules. I don't make decisions through emotions. Decisions are made for me by what's going on in the market. I'm building a process that I can follow calmly, and also one that won't allow me to self-destruct when I get emotional. So now you're probably watching this and wondering why I'm doing this so publicly on YouTube for thousands to see. There's a couple of reasons why I'm doing it publicly. Number one, accountability really matters, okay? So when you're accountable for your decisions, when you tell people what you're doing, it gives you a sense of discipline. It gives you a sense of responsibility to fulfill on your promises and your commitment. And I feel like documenting this through YouTube and through my Substack gives me full accountability. It allows me to stay laser focused, and it motivates me to stay consistent and to see this through, because the reality is I don't really have a choice. I need a retirement fund. I need to be able to retire at some point. Secondly, I know I'm not the only person in this scenario. I know loads of people who don't have a pension, who have paid into a pension, it won't be enough. Over here in the UK, the government pension is tiny. There's no money for anyone. Over the years, the government have put less and less in looking after elderly people. And I know there's millions of people out there, thousands and millions of people out there who are genuinely scared about their retirement. Already in the UK, old people can't afford their food bills, heating bills. We have absolutely astronomical energy prices. So I'm doing it for them. I don't want to sound like a hero or like some kind of martyr, but I know there's a lot of people in this boat. It would be incredibly irresponsible of me to say go out there and throw your money in Bitcoin. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the way I approach Bitcoin as an investment through the volatility and the system I've used, that works for me in my time frame. So if you're in your 40s and you want to retire by 50, 55, the system I'm using, the system I'm staying completely accountable for, the system I will commit to for the next 10 years on this YouTube channel, on my Substack, that is why I'm doing this so publicly, because it means so much, because the stakes are real. On YouTube here, I will explain the thinking, the fundamentals. I will go into why I believe Bitcoin is a serious retirement asset. I'll try and educate people as to why I think Bitcoin needs to be part of your retirement fund, either 100% or a smaller allocation. Because personally, I do think it's a trade of a generation. It has asymmetrical upside. What that means is we've got very little in the way of downside and a super upside. The fundamentals are looking great. Traditional finance are really backing it. We're still very early in the Bitcoin game. However, it is 17 years old, so it's a very young asset in terms of sort of gold and S&P 500 and NASDAQ, but I feel like we're at a really good time. If you want a deeper framework in terms of how I execute my portfolio, I do everything on Substack. But to wrap all this up, guys, I'm 45 years old, I am broke, I am all in on Bitcoin. Not because I'm fearless, not because I'm trying to be a hero, but that's all I've got, and time is passing by very, very quickly. If you like the content, please hit like, please subscribe. Thank you.